Hi, welcome back to the workshop for episode 18 of the TV Yellow Les Paul Jr. build. And in this episode, we're going to be polishing up that finish that we put on last week and also applying and lacquering over the headstock decal. So we got the finish on last time. It's kind of drying off nicely. It's nowhere near as hard and as dry as I'd want it to be, but I'm under a little bit of time pressure with this build because I've got some other stuff that I need to be getting on with quite urgently. I'm trying to film this under natural daylight because the shots I did last time under my LED lights just look very yellow and insipid and not really representative of the colour as it is. I think looking in my monitor, this looks much more like the colour it actually is. So hopefully you can see whilst it is still yellow, it's not that kind of bright yellow that it might have appeared to be in the last shots you saw. Now I would like to leave this a lot longer before I polish it up, but having said that, I'm not going to go for a high gloss factory finish on this one. I want it to look as if it's got a bit of age on, so it's not going to be polished up with a machine. It's not going to be mopped or anything. I'm going to rub this through the grades of Super Acrylics, then I'm going to get some Trizac pads on it, and hopefully that will bring it up to the kind of gloss level that we want. However, there are some things we need to do before that. First up, we need to get the headstock sorted out. And the first thing we need to do is to get some black paint onto this headstock. So we've got something we can put the decal on. Now, I had an interesting question in the comments about this a couple of weeks ago where someone asked, isn't it normal for Gibsons to use a holly veneer on the headstocks of their guitars? It is, but in this case it isn't. So my belief is Juniors, Melody Makers, things like that had a black painted headstock with a gold transfer on it. But once you get to the level of the Les Paul Special and kind of anything above that level, they have the holly veneer with the inlaid logo and everything else. So hopefully that clears up why in this instance it would just be black paint. And in this particular instance, I'm just going to give it 2 or 3 coats of gloss black nitrocellulose just so we get a nice good coverage. We will then apply the decals in the normal fashion, and they will be over lacquered again with lots and lots of clear nitrocellulose. Okay, so we need that paint on the headstock to dry properly before we can do too much with it. So while that's happening, we'll start the process of getting the body and the back of the neck flatted down and polished up. And I'm not going to go too far with this. I'm going to go with Super Acrylics in 600, 800 and 1200, and then I'll go to 3000 and 6000 Trizac pads, and I'm hoping that will give me the kind of vintage shine that I'm after. But before I do that, I'm going to take 400 paper on a flat block, and I'm just going to take off kind of like the top layer of this just to make it a little bit easier. And I'm being careful to keep away from the very edges because that will burn through quite quickly with this grade of paper. Just a little bit more in that corner. And then with that done, I've got some Super Acrylics here on this little soft foam pad. This is 600, and I'm just going to start working my way through with that. And what I'm aiming to do here is get it a nice, consistent, flat finish so that all of the little light shiny spots where the lacquer has sunk into the grain of the wood have disappeared. Because obviously if those low spots are quite deep, you will burn through your finish before you sand them out. But this seems to be going okay. So I'll keep working my way through this and I'll join you back in a little while. Okay, so that's all sanded now to 1200 grit super acrylics. It's feeling lovely, wonderful and smooth. Next up, I'm going to take a 3000 and a 6000 Trizact pad and just give these their final kind of little polish up. But before I do that, I'm just going to take a little bit of this paste wax and just fill up those little screw holes with a bit of that. Otherwise you can get moisture into those wood fibres. It swells them up, and before you know it you've got cracks around those holes. So we'll just take that little bit of preventative measure before we do anything else. I'm going to try and use as little moisture as possible on this, and again it's just a case of working your way around this. It doesn't actually take a lot with these Trizact pads. All you're really doing is refining those 1200 grit scratches. And I can see already, if I get that in the light, it's going to be really hard to demonstrate, but that is starting to take a shine now. So we'll just repeat that process with the 6000. And I don't know how well we can demonstrate that, but that is now starting to take on a bit of a sheen and a bit of a shine. So I'll just keep working away with the Trizact pads until we get it to the level of finish that we want. And if you're wondering what it is in the tin lid that I've been using to polish this up with, it's just a swirl remover from Maguire's, part of their deep crystal system. I've had this for years, so you might not be able to buy it, but I'm sure they've got a similar product on sale now. Very, very good, just for removing those fine sanding marks and getting you the finish that you need. And hopefully you can see there, you can pick up the shine of that overhead light in the lacquer. So that's come up very nicely. And I think you can see there, that's a much better shot. It's nice and shiny, it's got a really good gloss, but it's also got that kind of almost wispy, smoky quality to it of an older finish. So yeah, happy with that. Just got to do the rest of it now. Okay, and there's the back done as well. That's all looking rather splendid. So there's still a little bit of work to do on the back of the neck and around the edges, but I'm going to leave that until we've got the decal and at least a couple of coats of lacquer onto the headstock. Okay, so there's the headstock all painted up. I've rubbed it down a little bit. There's a little bit of orange peel in there, but I'm not particularly worried about that. This is going to have a lot of clear coats over the top, so hopefully we should be able to cover that and get it all flatted off and polished up. Lovely. I've got my decal prepared. Now I've gone a little bit off piece with this one because I've actually sprayed it with nitro lacquer and not acrylic. I'm hoping that the nitro lacquer on the top of here will still work, but it will also kind of melt down a lot easier once I start to overspray this, which means I won't have to put quite as much lacquer on. That's my plan. Whether or not it works is a different thing. Worst case scenario is it's a complete disaster. We just have to kind of rub it all off and start again. Hoping that's not going to happen, but it's not the worst thing in the world if it does. So to start this off, I'm actually going to cut this into 2 bits, and I'm going to put the pieces on individually just so I've got a little bit more control over where they actually go. And when I do these, my preference is to actually make the decal section as small as I can, just so there's less stuff to hide. And I think it also helps if it's as smooth as you can make it without any sharp corners. I think that all helps to hide it. So that's that section. That will go somewhere there. And that's the little name bit, which will go up here. And then I've just got a saucer of kind of warmish water. And I'm just going to wet the headstock a little bit just to aid moving those around. Just let that soak for a little while. It's just a question of kind of delicately sliding it off the backing paper. Get that out of the way. Position it where you want it. While that second one's soaking, we can just take a bit of that moisture off. My fear was that the nitro lacquer wouldn't hold together as well as the acrylic stuff does, but it seems to have worked just fine. And I think that looks pretty much spot on. So that's had about half an hour to dry out. I've had a hairdryer on it. It is nice and dry. So once again, it's out with the rattle can. And just start laying some clear down on this. I'm going to start with some kind of very, very light passes, just to get a little bit of lacquer over the top. That's going to hold it in place. And then over a period of time, I will just keep coming back. Ideally, I'd want to do this over a number of days, putting maybe 3 coats down per day, making sure there's plenty of time in between for them to kind of flash off. But I am under a fair amount of time pressure to get this one done, so it will happen a little bit quicker than that. I don't think it'll affect the quality of the job. It will just mean that the final polish job on this, where it will be rubbed down absolutely flat and buffed up to a mirror finish, won't happen for a little while yet. But like I say, time isn't on my side anymore, so we'll just have to do it how we can. But I've got to say, I think with the nitro instead of the acrylic lacquer, that seems to be sitting down a lot flatter already. So yeah, happy days. Okay, and there you can see I've got a few coats on now, and I've been doing some rubbing down. and we're getting somewhere near. Having a little bit of a problem with this lacquer blushing. It's been a little bit humid over the last couple of days, but it's rubbing out okay, so I'm not really concerned about that. So realistically, it's just now a case of continuing to slowly but surely build up the layers of lacquer on this, and then once it's dry, rubbing it down. And as you can probably see, we're getting quite close to getting those decals level with the rest of the lacquer. It has really helped using that nitrocellulose lacquer on top of the decal to seal it. And you can see there, that's starting to blush up quite nicely. A little bit annoying, but ultimately it won't be a problem. It will be fine once we kind of get it all polished up. So I'm going to continue with that, and I'll be polishing the sides of the body and everything else up in between putting those coats on. I don't think we really need to focus too heavily on that. I'm going to be back in a couple of days' time with the final episode in this series, where we'll get all the fretwork sorted out, we'll get everything put onto the guitar, we'll get it strung up, set up, and have a little demonstration. So make sure you don't miss out on that. And one really good way of doing that is to hit that subscribe button and also hit the notification bell. And while you're at it, click that like button as well. It really will help me out. And then I'll look forward to seeing you on the series finale. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.